Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest joining us today, Laura Stack. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I am Laura Stack. I am the founder and CEO of a nonprofit based in South Denver, Colorado, called Johnny's Ambassadors, which I formed in May of 2020, 6 months after our son, Johnny, died by suicide, sadly, at the age of 19. He had become psychotic from dabbing very high potency marijuana here in Colorado, where we live. So after 30 years as a professional speaker, I changed my entire platform, and now I'm speaking about substance use prevention, specifically for teens, around the harms of using today's very potent marijuana on their brain development. So sadly, something very tragic that has happened in our lives that we hope will make a difference in others' lives going forward.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for your loss. And it just was, I remember when it became legal in Colorado, and certain people were just super excited about that, and it's never been something that I've liked even being around, let alone doing. And I hate the smell so
I know.
much.
Well, and when we were kids and it was skunky and really weak, and I didn't know that it had changed so much, that there are the vapes and dabs and waxes and shatters and all of these new products. I was still thinking, about the 80s, growing up as a teen, where, we had papers and we would roll a joint, and I didn't know that it was very weak back then. The potency was between 2% and 5% THC, the tetrahydrocannabinol, the psychoactive part of marijuana. And so I have to say that as a mom, when Johnny first told me, because we were very close, and that would not be an abnormal thing for him to do, that he had gone to a party and that one of his friend's brothers was 18 and had just gotten a medical marijuana card by telling the doctor he had a migraine. And so there was marijuana at this party, and Johnny said everybody just wanted to try it to see what it was like to be high. And that was the beginning of his addiction. And I kind of in my mind said, it's just pot, I used it. I'm fine. It's not a big deal. Well, I was so wrong. I didn't know that what they were using was 80% THC. I didn't know that the distillates and the shatters are being used, and they can almost be pure THC, that the plant isn't even part of marijuana anymore, that a lot of the kids are not even smoking. They're using these other products, which are extremely potent.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things we're trying to explain to parents, moms in particular, whose kids come to them and say things like, we used marijuana at the party. And how do you respond to that?
Yeah. And I have an acquaintance. She was a customer of mine in my direct sales business. And I mean, we met, and then like a week later, she was posting that her daughter passed away from taking a sleeping pill that was laced with fentanyl.
Yikes.
And she was 14 years old.
Yeah.
And
And
it's just, drugs are not, it's not the 80s, it's not the 70s, it's not the 60s anymore. Like, it's a whole new world that we're dealing with.
completely. A lot of people think about Woodstock and love and peace, and it's just so mild and harmless. And, we didn't have all these substances. Our nonprofit just deals with marijuana because it's just everywhere. And the latest Monitoring the Future study just came out yesterday and showed that during the pandemic, drug use had gone down across the board, but smoking and vaping marijuana had gone up. In other words, as a whole, because kids were home, they didn't have as many opportunities for substance use. But we saw mental health issues rising. And when they did use substances, that more than drinking, other drugs, smoking, other substances, sadly, they're vaping and smoking marijuana, that increased. So that kind of says to me, those studies were done on 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. So they're not 21 years old. Right. So they're not buying this legally. No. So you have to wonder how many parents are providing the marijuana to their children, thinking that it's harmless, that it's benign, right? That, oh, well, it's legal, it must be safe. Not understanding how potent these products are, how very different it is from when we were kids, and that it can actually cause mental harm. Just a week ago, the American Academy in Psychiatry, in their journal, just reported that there are no psychiatric benefits of marijuana, that any benefit that's ever been studied and proven by the FDA and other scientific studies have been all around pain, seizure disorders, cancer pain, anorexia. In other words, very rare things. And it's actually counterindicated for anxiety. It makes anxiety worse. And it can actually cause depression. So I think there's just this, since legalization, just this running narrative that's false, and that somehow it will help, and they really need to do some research and some education on the thousands of studies that are out there showing the harms, because of the brain still developing until the mid-20s for young women, and even into their early 30s for young men, that it causes structure changes in the way their brains form with these new high potency products, and causes thinning of the prefrontal cortex, bipolar, schizophrenia, acute psychotic episodes. So we're just really trying to get the word out there, Alicia, to get parents to understand that it is not harmless, and don't ever provide it to your child. It's incredibly bad for their brains.
And what I kind of always go to is like the reason that we're wanting to take a drug, or the reason that we're wanting to drink alcohol, or like it boils down to this emotional thing that we have in our society where emotions are bad. And so when we say, stop crying, be a man, don't be a little girl, stop being so emotional. When
Toughen
we say
up.
these things to our kids, we don't know how to not be emotional. I know I don't know how to not be emotional. And so a lot of times we use things to numb that, and drugs and food and,
Gambling,
watching TV all day, gambling,
videos,
all of these things that are addictions, they start out as a way to, I don't want to deal with this emotion thing, right? So that's the kind of the purpose of the podcast, is that, if we talk to the parents and talk to the moms and get our moms to
appreciate personal development and really get into it themselves, it spreads, kind of like a virus through your family, where everybody else is going to kind of also be more healthy emotionally and all of that. And then we don't
So
need
agree.
those.
Yes.
We don't need the distractions. We don't need to smoke to calm ourselves down, but we aren't given the tools. So we have to find them ourselves as moms and teach them to our kids. It's
Well, and it's
imperative.
it's a, they think it's a quick fix,
Right.
right? You just
Mhm.
think, oh, I'll just, this'll help me chill out.
Yeah.
Right. And it actually makes it worse. And then if you develop on top of it a cannabis use disorder, right?
Yeah.
Now you're addicted, right?
Yeah.
You have a completely different set
Yeah.
of problems. The research shows that if a mom uses marijuana in the past year, that her child is 80% more likely to pick it up. And there's a huge difference physiologically between a grown adult using marijuana whose brain is formed and a child, a teen using marijuana whose brain's not formed. They're going to have completely different outcomes. Not that it's ever, there's never a guarantee that, using marijuana is safe for anybody at any age. I have a friend who's a mom of 2 and lives on the East Coast, and she came out here to Colorado and had lunch with a mutual friend of ours and had never hit one of these dab pens, and took 2 hits of a 90% concentrate, and was in the mental hospital for 2 weeks hallucinating.
Wow.
And thought her nurse was a shapeshifter, she told me, and that everybody was in on it. And she was 51 at the time. And she's given me permission to tell that story.
Yeah.
So it's not even always self-medicating as it is. We think it's harmless or fun, or we just want to see what it's like to get high. I mean, here in Colorado, it's a party drug. It's been legal here for almost 10 years recreationally.
Yeah.
And for the teens, sadly, it's easier to get than alcohol. They can't get alcohol till they're 21, but you can be 18. There are 4,000 18-year-olds in Colorado here with a medical marijuana card.
Wow.
And they go to the doctor, and you can make up any kind of cockamamie. There's a lot of resources, websites on teens telling other teens how to get your med card. You just say you have a backache, and you pay a few $100, you go get your med card, and you go over to the dispensary and you buy these really potent products, and you go to the high school and sell them.
Yeah.
So we know that because use is going up in smoking and vaping, that they're getting it either from mom or a sibling, right? Or a friend, because they think it's going to help them. Like you said, they're trying to just keep the pain away without actually dealing with the things that are causing the pain.
Right. And, and I've heard the myth, apparently the lie now, that no one ever died from too much weed.
Oh yeah.
And that it's not all that bad. It's really harmless. It's like I've also heard it's the gateway drug, right?
Yeah.
But there's lots of myths out there. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing and the lives that you're saving by speaking out on this.
Well, in fact, the Centers for Disease Control just said it is the gateway drug. A new study shows in the risk behavioral survey that the number one predictor of whether a high school senior will have abused opioids in the past 30 days is lifetime marijuana use, not alcohol. It just surpassed alcohol. Lifetime marijuana use is now the number one predictor of whether they go on to use opioids. So it can now kill you. There is a new syndrome with these high potency products called cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, CHS, and it's cyclical vomiting. It's nonstop vomiting, and they can't control it, and they die from dehydration and organ shutdown. It's usually acute renal failure.
Wow.
So even though there's not cannabinoid receptors in the brainstem, so it's not going to stop your breathing like heroin or opioids, you can have acute intoxication and overdoses, vomiting, poisonings, acute psychosis. Some of our doctors on our advisory board work in emergency rooms, and they say every day,
Wow.
teens are in the emergency room from using these products. So definitely have become a lot more harmful over the years.
Yeah, sounds like it. So from your experience, is there a piece of advice that you would want to share with our moms?
Well, I would just share that 3 days before my son died, he came over to our house, and he was 19. He's having dinner, and he lived in a condo because he was, he had gone to 3 different universities trying to battle this addiction.
Mm.
And he said, "Hey, Mom, I just want you to know you were right." And I said, "About what?" And he said, "About the marijuana." He said, "You told me that marijuana would hurt my brain and it laughed at you. And I want you to know it has ruined my mind and my life.
Mm.
And I'm sorry. And I love you." And I didn't see it as suicidal, because our relationship had been really damaged over the past few years since he was using. And so I thought he was reconciling, and I missed it, and 3 days later, he jumped off a building.
Mm.
And he wrote in his journals that the mob was after him. We didn't even know these journals existed until after he died. And he said that the FBI wanted him, and that everybody was in on it. And it was just completely delusional.
Wow.
And so I would just advise moms to just get in your kids' business, a little more, understand if they're using marijuana, and have very clear no use boundaries. And if they're using, get them help.
Yeah.
We tried for many, many years to get him help, and it was just too late. And don't give up, and get help yourself if you need it for your own addiction, because that's what your kids are watching.
Right.
So I would share that as just kind of the last thing that was exchanged between us, that
Yeah.
just shows
Well,
the depth of some of their pain.
yeah. And thank you for the realness of that. Obviously, I felt the emotion, and that was just very real. And I'm sure everybody's in tears. And
Oh, I try, but
Yeah.
it's only been 2 years, so it's still a little
Yeah.
rough, especially around the holidays.
Yeah. Yeah. And I usually ask our readers for a book, or our listener or our guests for a book recommendation. And I hear you have a new book. So tell us what that is.
Well, after Johnny passed, I was in a fetal position for about 6 months, and then
Mm.
I woke up and it was COVID. So I had 2 for-profit businesses, which I still have, but they're all related to training and speaking. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. So I sat down and I wrote for 6 months.
Mm.
And I wrote 300 pages, The Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana, Johnny Stack's Life and Death Story. And it has 176 scientific notations so that people can really dig in and get educated and understand the research about the harms of youth marijuana use. So I guess I would recommend my own book, especially if you're, a mom who has young children. We have to start talking to them very young, and
Yeah.
how to intervene if your child is using. So
Yeah.
I'd invite anybody to take a look at that.
Yeah. And one thing that I say to my son when he says, "Can I tell you something?" My response is, "You can tell me anything."
Yes.
And every single time, it doesn't matter if he just asked me, "Can I tell you something?" And then 5 minutes later, "Can I tell you something else?" You can tell me anything. Like, he knows, that's ingrained into him. And he's told me things that have been really hard to hear,
Yeah.
but other moms are like, "He told you that?" And it's like, yeah,
And you're like,
because I
"I
tell him,
want
"You
him
can
to."
tell me anything."
Yes.
And don't let anybody tell your kid, "Don't tell mom."
Right.
Because then, like, mom's supposed to be the safe place. And if you tell your kid, "Don't tell mom," or if somebody tells your kid, "Don't tell mom," you're now taking away the safe place.
Right.
So
Be that person they can come to say,
be the
hey,
person. Yeah.
I
And
just use marijuana, or I'm having a problem, or
yeah. And it's silly. My son lost his water bottle today, and he kind of lied about it at first. And then he finally said, okay, I lost it. Like, I didn't take it off the bus yesterday morning, so I didn't have it at school yesterday. And I'm like, well, I'm more irritated that you didn't just tell me than I am about the water bottle being missing. Like, the water bottle is,
that.
I don't care. Like, who cares? Like, it's just money. We can make more money. Like, there's always access. Just, it's not about the money. Like, just, I will be so much less irritated. And I followed it up on the way to school. I was like, I will be so much less irritated in the long run if you just tell me the truth about stuff. But when you try to be sneaky and hide things, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And
we've got to watch if they're being secretive, sneaking, and do some room searches if necessary. But it's definitely something we're going to have to get on top of now that we know vaping and smoking are way up. Well, thank you for having me. I sure appreciate.
Absolutely. And I know we could have talked so much longer, but we have some time constraints today, and that's okay. But
well, if anybody, hears this and has a child in trouble or has questions or just wants to get educated, I would love to share our website with them, johnny'sambassadors.org. And all the materials are free, and dive in, and I'm here if you need me.
Perfect. Thank you. And I will have that in the show notes so they can easily access you. And again, thank you for coming. And next week, we'll have another episode of Imperfect Momming. And until then, keep healing. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AlysiaLyons.com. That's AlysiaLyons.com. See you next time.